Hello. Earlier last year, I did a keynote speech in Amsterdam. It was the first keynote that I had done after COVID. It was the first keynote that I'd done with actual live human beings in front of me. And it was delicious and terrifying at the same time because I had done something really different. My speech was on day 2. So after a day and a half of presentations from other incredible women around the world, mine was really different. Really different. And whilst I was pretty confident when I was putting it together, I was like, yes, I want to be different. I want to do this different thing. By halfway through day 2, my inner critic arrived with gusto, shall we say. We arrived with gusto. And to the point that I actually needed to call a colleague and say, oh my goodness, you need to talk me down. I'm on the ledge. And he gave me a perfect piece of advice, which was trust the work. The work works. Because even knowing, even being the coach that coaches people through this stuff, our inner critic, my inner critic, can play up. When it gets an opportunity, when it sees a chink in the armor, it's like, ooh, playtime. Now, there is an upside to that. And I could see that afterwards. The upside was like, yes, because you're growing, you're expanding, you're getting back out there after COVID, you're learning to be back in front of human beings, you're getting back into your stride. I mean, the good news was like literally not even 30 seconds into the process, I was like, oh yes, I'm back. And all that nonsense that the inner critic was spouting kind of disappeared. But the point is our inner critic is going to show up when we're in those stretchy zones, when we're doing things that feel a little bit more challenging. And really what we want to be focusing on is noticing the difference between our inner critic and what's realistic thinking. So our inner critic's voice tends to be black and white. It is this. You are stupid. You don't deserve to be here. What are you talking about? It is very black and white. It's also mean. You know, I cannot think of anybody that I know that would call another human being to their face stupid. And yet we probably say it to ourselves all the time. So it's a mean and it's repetitive. It says the same things over and over and over again. So our inner critic is the voice inside us that is black and white, mean and repetitive. It's many other things as well, but those are 3 very common ones. Whereas if we're being realistic, we are much more curious. We've got many more questions. It's like, well, if I want to do that thing, how do I get to do it? How do I make that happen? What's possible if I X, Y, and Z? Our realistic thinking is much more empathetic. It's like, yeah, that stings. That doesn't feel good. And okay, yes, you might feel a little bit scared, but it's a much more empathetic voice. And it's much more, as I say, much more focused on how. What if? How could we? What would need to happen? What would need to be true for X to happen? That's much more realistic thinking. So accepting that maybe you're not ready for something, but finding a way to get there as quickly as possible. So it's really important that we learn to distinguish between those 2 things. Now, for many people, their inner critic shows up when they are speaking in public. So presenting, doing keynote speeches, they're maybe on a podcast or an interview. That's when our inner critic likes to pitch up. And for some people, it really plays up beforehand. For some people, it plays up in the speaking, in the moment. And for some people, it shows up at the end. Now, some people will have it at all 3 points. But for lots of people, there is a particular point where the inner critic is much more active, let's say, is much more active than at others. So one of the things to consider is, today we're going to talk about before. If your inner critic plays up beforehand, this might be one of the ways to notice that's where it plays up more. So is no your default? Is it the thing that you also, if somebody said to you, oh my goodness, you should be on our panel. We've got this amazing panel. You would be perfect. You immediately go, oh no, I can't. Or pray that you've got something in your diary on that same day so you don't have to do it. Because if no is your default, then you're not really giving yourself the opportunity to consider whether this is a good opportunity for you or not. So it's not really a conscious decision. That decision is being driven by fear, which is almost certainly being fueled by your inner critic. So if no is your default, then the chances are that your inner critic plays up for you beforehand more than perhaps in other places. You might also notice things like you say yes, but then your inner critic is going like, when will you learn? What is wrong with you? You keep saying yes to these things and you're dreadful at it. Yeah. Or who am I to do this? Or who am I to talk at this conference? I don't have enough experience. So the who am I piece also shows you that your inner critic is playing up at the beginning or before you actually speak. And actually, that's a really good one to flip around. So an exercise that you can do is, who are you not to? So list all the reasons why you, specifically you, are the right person to be talking about this thing at this time to this audience. So why you? What experience do you have, either personal or professional? That means you're perfect to talk about this. More than perfect. What values, what attributes, what ethics do you have, which mean you are a great person to be talking about this thing? And the final thing, and I think this is a really, really important one, what could potentially be lost if you don't speak? So there, I'm really inviting you to think about, what is it that you bring that nobody else brings? What is it that's unique about you as an individual, about your experience, about the company that you work for, the product that you have, whatever it might be? What is it about you that is utterly unique? And what will be lost if somebody else talks about this? What does everybody else talk about that you disagree with, or you think differently about, or you're doing differently? So I would really invite you to think, who are you not to do this? Now, the second thing that you can do if your inner critic plays up before you speak is, I've called this open the door. You open the door to it, because sometimes when our inner critic plays up, we're like, oh my goodness, and we try and sort of squash it down and we pretend that it's not there and we're not looking and we're like, la 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 over here. But actually it just gets louder and sneakier and all those kinds of things. And one of the ways we can combat that is literally by opening the door, by going, hi there, hello you, come on in. And then having a really frank conversation saying, listen, I hear what you're saying, but I've got this. I'm going to do it anyway. Yeah, I might mess it up. Yeah, it's not necessarily going to go perfectly, but I'm okay. I will be fine, whether it's amazingly successful or not as successful as I would really, really like. So if you fight the inner critic, it will get louder and sneakier. If you open the door and let it in, it's kind of got nowhere to go. So if you find your inner critic is playing up before you speak, there's two ways that you can deal with it. So who are you not to speak about this thing? And open the door and let it in and just acknowledge that it's there. I see you, I hear you, I'm doing my thing anyway. Because that is really helpful for dealing with your inner critic, for dealing with that doubt before you speak. There's 2 more videos in this series. So if you're someone who has more inner critic issues when you are actually speaking, listen to video 2. And if you're someone who has inner critic rage after you've spoken, then we're going to deal with that in video 3. Thank you for listening. Take care, and I will speak to you ever so soon.